Hi everyone. Now in this session we're just going to try and understand some of the key evaluation strands that you can use in your China and the global economy paper. So this essay is obviously very long, it's very detailed. You need to make sure that you reread the question every 10 minutes or so that you are very clued up on exactly what is going on within the nature of this question, and that every paragraph answers the question which has been stated. But in addition to this, you want to try and evaluate throughout, of course, so you want to develop those evaluative strands throughout your essays, and any sort of policy responses or assessments or judgments that you are making on economic reforms will help you to do this, okay? So, as we've said here, make a judgment. So you could be, for instance, talking about the relative convergence of China's economy, i.e. becoming the largest economy in the world, but actually it's absolute convergence that might be more important for the global economy. So while China will become the largest economy in the world, that's not to say that they are a rich country. They are far from that. Of course, their GDP per capita is about $48,000 below that of the United States, based on 2016 figures. So perhaps it's that absolute convergence that's really important here. Okay, assessments on policy reform and the need for these reforms, as well as your judgments on the progress and what needs to happen next, will be a very fruitful strand of evaluation throughout your essay in all likelihood. The examiners love to see detail. If you can provide some key insights about specific policy reforms, you will be rewarded for that. There's no doubt about that. Okay, this next one is, I think, more likely to be included in your final judgment, perhaps, but it's about the importance of Chinese culture. Chinese culture is really likely to determine what the outcome is. We've seen that most commentators don't think China is going to westernize as they continue to become richer. And further to this, of course, they've adopted a gradualist approach to economic transition, as opposed to the shock therapy or Big Bang approach in Eastern Europe. Okay, so that means, of course, for all of these policy reforms, they are going to be implemented in a very gradual process. Okay, this next point is perhaps something which relates nicely to the most important point within your judgment. So answer the question, it depends upon, and your most important factors for consideration. The prioritization or degrees of impact. Okay, so if you're able to actually prioritize which economic reforms need to actually take place first, and why, again, you will be significantly rewarded for that. Further to that, it could be about degrees of opportunities that are presented to countries across the world, and to what extent you see particular countries benefiting from China's growth and perhaps increased influence over the world economy, and to what extent you see other countries really being negatively affected by this and being seen to be a real negative influence. So that will again be another very powerful theme that you could use in your evaluation. Next up, the degree to which China's global influence will actually be firstly desirable, and again you can link this back to specific countries, and you can link it back to the domestic situation in China. To what extent will it be desirable if it continues to increase inequality, perhaps, okay? If they don't pursue their hukou reforms to the extent that they need to, and that migrant labourers still continue to suffer. And what about the inevitability of China's situation? Well, we know the gradualist approach is going to determine the progress and speed at which all of these reforms take place. But inevitable, well, we've got the one bridge, one road initiative, of course, overseas. So their global influence is, of course, likely to increase. But to what extent? And what extent will that be a force for good and a force for perhaps building an empire? Okay. Finally, Chinese responses to the threat of the middle income trap or deglobalization and their likely chances of success. Again, this is something that is really going to be very powerful. If you can show that China has a role to play in promoting globalization at a time where some Western countries, as we know, are turning more inwards, and you can offer those policy solutions as we've looked at in a previous lesson, again, that's going to be very well rewarded. And likewise, in relation to the importance of this concept of the middle income trap and avoiding that. So, for instance, a strand you could use there is how China is expected to be the world's largest investor of research and development in the 2020s. Okay, so how likely are the chances of success of these policies, though? Or does that depend upon the rate at which reforms are actually undertaken? So you can see it's really quite intricate, but you get rewarded for detail. You get rewarded for being able to make a judgment and identify certain improvements that need to be made. So in your final judgment, of course, work to this AIM strategy, answer the question, justify that answer. What does your answer depend upon? What's really, really important that the Chinese or the global economy gets right in order to fulfill the answer that you've provided? And what is your most significant points for reform? What are your least important? Okay, there we go. All right, thanks guys. I hope that's